If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, with a special Saturday episode. We had an outstanding panel last night. We did not get all the way through the daily terrorism sitrep, so I'm going to cover the balance of that today, as well as the story broken by American Kinetics on the elevated terror threat to our trauma centers and soft targets, ISIS, ISKP, and Al Qaida. But before we get into that, let's do the conflicted question first. Hang out till the end, and I'll give you my answer at that point in time. For those of you not familiar with the conflicted question, go to conflictedthegame.com, and you'll see that they have multiple decks set in post-apocalyptic scenarios with questions that typically tie in somehow to your values, morals, beliefs, those sort of things. So this one's a doozy today, actually. And it's one I don't believe we've ever read on air before. So you were forced out of your survival retreat by an incoming hostile army. Now on the run, food and water are low. You and your survivalist friends can barely stave off hunger by foraging. One of your friends comes to you in need of advice. His spouse decided she'll sell her body for supplies at the trade post in order to feed the children. Your friend is between a rock and a hard place and needs your input. What would your advice be? Man, that's a doozy of a question. And like I said, I hang out till the end. I'll give you my thoughts on that particular one. But before we get rolling into the main topic, I've got a special message from our friends at Noble Gold. NobleGoldInvestments.com, by the way, is the website. So I want to kind of address something that was mentioned in the comment sections of one of our videos, and that was that gold didn't do particularly well in the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, and that's actually not the case. And so I'm going to just go through this briefly here. During the 2008-2009 economic meltdown, often referred to as the global financial crisis, the prices of gold and silver exhibited distinct patterns due to their status as safe haven assets and their sensitivity to economic conditions. Gold, pre-crisis, early 2008, gold prices were already on an upward trend to growing economic uncertainty. In March 2008, gold reached a nominal high of around $1,000 per ounce. Initial decline mid-2008 as the crisis intensified, particularly after the Lehman Brothers collapse in September 2008. Gold prices briefly declined, dropping to around $700 per ounce by October 2008. But this was driven by a liquidity crunch as investors sold assets, including gold, to cover losses or meet margin calls in other markets. Recovery and surge. Late 2008-2009, gold rebounded strongly as investors sought safe haven assets amid market turmoil, inflation fears, and distrust in fiat currencies. By the end of 2009, gold prices had risen to approximately $1,100 per ounce, surpassing pre-crisis levels. And there's a chart, I believe. Yeah, there it is right there. So there's a gold price graph from 2005 to 2025. So you can see the brief dip around 2013 when our friend Barry Soetoro came into office. But look at what's happened to it since then. And we're now trading at $3,338.87 per ounce. And that's as of approximately an hour ago. So back to our friends at Noble Gold. And again, you can see Charlie Kirk endorses them as well. Basically, most people think their 401k, pardon me, is safe, that it's growing, that it's going to provide enough for your retirement. But the $64,000 question is, what if it's not? So the truth is the 401ks were never designed to make you or anybody else wealthy. They were designed in corporate boardrooms to offload risk from corporations to you. And then you have to deal with the uncertainty instead of them. So you can take back control by turning to real assets again, like gold and silver. Noble Gold has a large base of customers, and it's one of the reasons that I decided that we would work with them. And what they can do is take your 401k and convert it to a gold-backed IRA, much safer. There's a lot of people out there, a lot smarter than I am, that are predicting astronomical prices for gold in the not too distant future. I have some friends of mine who are deep into this, and they're telling me that one of Donald Trump's strategies is probably going to be to back the 37 trillion in debt that we have with gold, oil, and Bitcoin. And that's pretty phenomenal. If that 37 trillion gets backed by those things and transitions from being a fiat currency, holy cow, investments in gold and Bitcoin and oil are going to absolutely skyrocket. Anyway, check out noblegoldinvestments.com, safest way to survive retirement and make sure you have enough money during those years. And if you sign up now, I think it's before the end of this month, actually, at noblegoldinvestments.com, they're going to give you 2 5-ounce silver America the Beautiful coins completely for free. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into the main topic here. We touched on it last night, and everybody on the panel weighed in on it. But there's been a whole bunch of activity since then of people asking questions, asking for more information. And I want to back this up just to qualify something a little bit. So we shared some open source intel a couple years ago that essentially detailed how swarm attacks would happen here in America. Now I'm just going to go back to the full screen here for a second. And what that means is that there's been credible open source intel now for upwards of 20 years saying that the bad guys, so AQ, Al Qaida, ISIS, Hezbollah, Hamas, amongst others, Hamas not so much here, but definitely Hezbollah and AQ and ISIS, that they would attack smaller counties that have a population under 200,000, potentially under 100,000. And they would unleash, just for argument's sake, arbitrary numbers, a dozen terror cells today. And let's assume today's a weekday, and attack 12 schools simultaneously. They would not have enough law enforcement presence, even with mutual aid from surrounding counties, to respond to more than one of these attacks, most likely. And in light of that, the next day, you've got 11 of the 12 cells survived. They move over to another county. And next thing you know, they're attacking 11 schools simultaneously. Then the next day, they go to another small community. They're attacking 10 schools simultaneously. So when this gets war gamed out, the results are always the same. Within the first day, nobody's sending their kids to school. By the second day, nobody's working. By the third day, everything has ground to a complete halt. So imagine that instead of attacking schools, they were attacking hospitals, trauma centers first, and then going and attacking the other locations. It paints a pretty ugly picture. So this intel from our friends over at American Kinetics is pretty important stuff. So this graphic here, they put together back in April, but they've issued a completely new alert since then. But I want to read this off to you. AX has identified credible intelligence indicating an ISIS-K plot targeting level 1 trauma centers in mid-tier U.S. cities. Threat indicators include the potential of vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, coordinated armed assaults, and hostage scenarios. Notably, ISIS-K has previously employed first responder uniforms to infiltrate secure areas and create confusion during attacks. A joint bulletin issued by the American Hospital Association and Health, ISAC, on March 20th, 25, highlighted U.S. hospitals as high-risk, soft targets requiring immediate security assessment. Why hospitals? Considered critical infrastructure with potential for high civilian casualties, vulnerable. Over 430 documented attacks on hospitals globally between 1970 and 2018. Many mid-tier facilities have limited physical security, which increases target attractiveness. recommended actions for local governments, increase patrols and maintain visible law enforcement presence around hospitals, review and rehearse emergency response protocols for complex multi-phase attacks, coordinate with federal partners, FBI and DHS, report suspicious activity to local law enforcement or regional fusion centers immediately. And there's a note at the end, AX advises all to maintain heightened vigilance and share relevant intelligence across all jurisdictions. So this is the long form notification that went out 2 days ago from American Kinetics that we covered last night. And I'm going to go through it again because I know we have some people who can't watch our podcast at the time that we broadcast, which is typically 7 p.m. Eastern time. Today's an exception to the rule. So American Kinetics intel, elevated terror threat to U.S. trauma centers and soft targets by IKSP and Al-Qaeda. Again, it was issued 2 days ago. So what is this report about? This report evaluates current intelligence indicating an elevated threat from Islamic State, Khorasan Province, ISKP, and Al-Qaeda, AQ for short, toward U.S. level 1 trauma centers, particularly in tier 2 cities. And, you know, I had to ask some of the guys last night what exactly a tier 2 city is. And it would be something like Buffalo versus New York City. New York City would be considered a tier 1, and a smaller city like Buffalo would be considered a tier 2. And 2 seconds here. We've got company in the house, and I cannot hear myself think over the racket that's going on out there. Just bear with me for 1 second here while I try to adjust a couple of my settings. Hold up. Apologies for the interruption here. All right. All right. Apologies for the interruption there. So moving back to our report from American Kinetics here, and actually just so I've lost my train of thought a little bit with noise in the background. Apologies for that. Let me just start over again. So this is American Kinetics based out of Tampa, Florida, which we have a heavy military presence there, including Southern Command for everything south of here, essentially. And they put this report out on July 17th. This report evaluates current intelligence indicating an elevated threat from Islamic State, Khorasan Province, ISKP, and Al-Qaeda, AQ for short, toward U.S. level 1 trauma centers, particularly in tier 2 cities. While the report's primary focus remains on the vulnerability of these medical facilities, recent intelligence confirms that trauma centers are only one element in a broader multi-target campaign. This includes transportation hubs, airports, bus and train stations, and civilian soft targets such as churches and synagogues. And if you follow my friend Keith Graves, he does a fantastic job staying on top of the threat as far as churches are concerned and providing security guidance, security training, etc. So let's back up just briefly. So I want to stitch this together again. I lost my train of thought there with the background noise. But essentially, we've had intelligence for over 20 years, open source intelligence. We are not sharing anything that the bad guys don't already know, by the way. It's funny how every time we talk these subjects, there's a keyboard warrior comes out of the woodwork to say that we're giving the bad guys information and that we need to shut up. Well, security through obscurity doesn't work, number one. Number two, the intel that we do get that is not open source, we don't broadcast it. We're not allowed to broadcast it. But everything we do broadcast is open source intel, meaning it's very easy to find. You can stitch it all together yourself. We're absolutely not sharing anything with the bad guys. As a matter of fact, we're revealing what the bad guys are up to, and it's important that everybody's aware of this stuff. So imagine the scenario where this is going on across the country and not just in one city or one county. Easy to see how you end up with a total societal breakdown within a few days. And the worst part of that is, I've been saying for a long time, we're never more than 3 missed meals away from anarchy. So today's supply chain for grocery stores, they typically have 3 days of food on the shelves. A product drops to a preset level. It automatically sends out a notification to the distributor, placing an order for X amount of whatever the product is, sends out a bill of lading to the logistics company, and everything's automated. There is no backup. There's no dead tree format, meaning paper. There's no dead tree format and paper POs that you can go to restock. Plus, if nobody's going to work because they're afraid to leave their homes, You can see how the whole supply chain breaks down. And when there's no food available, just imagine how people would react. We see what people do over a TV on special on Black Friday. Imagine no food on the shelves. It's almost unimaginable because we've lived such pampered lives here compared to other countries. So moving on, I'm going to go through this entire update here from AX because this is really important stuff. And nobody has a crystal ball that tells everything that's going to happen. But if you step back and you look at things from a very high level, whether it's trauma centers, hospitals, schools, churches, whatever the case may be, I've even seen intel stating that 1 year on Black Friday that AQ wanted to target Best Buys across the country because they knew on Black Friday that they would be covered up in people and it'd be really juicy targets. And I want to reiterate, by the way, that Al-Qaida has flat out stated that they want a minimum of 50,000 casualties in their next attack on us here in the homeland. So again, regardless of what the final target is, there needs to be a level of awareness. So what I mean by a level of awareness for this stuff is things happen extremely fast on X, for example. You're going to get more current news and updates on X than anywhere else. Also, there's always this window of opportunity when something initially kicks off that you have a chance to get out of Dodge or to get off the X. Whereas the people who hang in there, don't pay attention or don't give it credence, inevitably they get stuck on the X in a very bad situation. I can give you a really good example here. You know, I live in Central Florida, have for years. I've been through, I don't know how many hurricanes, and we've only evacuated once in all the years that I've been here. And here's the deal. The state, the county says, okay, there's an evac order for whatever location. Invariably, there's lots of us who just don't leave. Like, we don't evac unless it's really, really serious. So when people say, yeah, I'm not going to go, and they hang in and the storm is almost on top of them and they realize how devastating it is, and they try to leave the state of Florida, I-75 and I-95 are parking lots from Florida and several states north. So now they're stuck in their car on the X when the storm's going to hit. The same applies to terrorist attacks like this. If you're paying attention and you have alerts on your phone, and I'll give you a good example, those people who are Guardian members, Survival Dispatch News Guardian members, get enrolled automatically in our SDEN system. It stands for Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System. We've used it once. We used it last month when we dropped the bombs on their nuclear centers because there was a high probability of retaliatory attacks here in the homeland. Thankfully, that didn't happen. Better safe than sorry. Either way, you have to keep your ear to the ground, pay attention to what's going on. Just imagine you're at work, okay? The average American works 15 miles from home. You're at work, your kids are at school, your spouse is at work, your dogs are at home, and all of a sudden these swarm attacks kick off. If you don't make a move really quickly, the chances of getting home or to a rendezvous point decline every minute as it goes on, which is also why we encourage people, you should always have a get home bag in your car. So just in case you can't drive your truck or car all the way home, you can grab that bag and get the rest of the way home. And depending on the distance, you might be able to do it the same day. It might take 2 or 3 days to walk home, but layers of planning, layers of protection. Same with your kids. What happens if your kids are trapped at the school? Well, it seems to me that should be your rendezvous point, right? You and your wife or husband should be meeting at the school to get your child and get off the X as fast as you possibly can. But if this stuff hasn't been thought through, there's an old adage, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that's exactly, unfortunately, the way this stuff goes off. So reeling this back in again, this intelligence from American Kinetics, which, by the way, there's always the naysayers, right? You know, this is baloney. I don't believe it. Somebody went to this post that was made by American Kinetics a couple days ago, and they drew Grok into the conversation. So at Grok, is this true or did they make this up? And Grok came back and said, this is a real threat. This is not make believe, and people should absolutely pay heed to it. So a lot of stuff's hard to tell these days with AI to identify something's legit or not. But the guys at American Kinetics are legit. I have no relationship with them, by the way. I subscribe to their daily newsletter. I think it's $12.50 a month. It's a great value. It's extremely in depth every day. Anyway, coming back to the warning at hand here, let me give you a few more bullets on this to chew on. So ISKP continues to expand global reach, directing operational guidance towards sympathetic US-based actors through encrypted digital platforms. Al-Qaida maintains emphasis on symbolically disruptive operations and is believed to be coordinating efforts with IKSP for multi-domain, high-impact attacks. If nothing else, one of the things that we've seen occur in recent years is all of the bad guys who hate us coming together. And this is not new, by the way. So in the 1990s, for example, Hezbollah Unit 910, and when I say Unit 910, that's not one small unit. Hezbollah is split into two pieces. You have Hezbollah in the Middle East, funded by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Then you have Hezbollah Unit 910, which is the rest of the entire world, and they have to fund themselves. So we have firsthand intel that they set up shop in the 1990s in Mexico and got cozy with Sinaloa cartel, amongst others, to engage in fentanyl production and trafficking, human trafficking, child sex trafficking, because they needed a way to make money. So to this day, go ahead, you can look it up, Hezbollah has been embedded for so long with the Mexican cartels, they now sound like them. They have the same enunciation, the same accent when speaking Spanish. They look the same. It's virtually impossible to identify somebody from Hezbollah versus Sinaloa cartel, for example. So moving on from there, the bottom line is, let me just actually close the loop on that. What I'm getting at is each of these terrorist organizations, bad guys, they might have X amount of resources at their disposal, X amount of soldiers, but combined together, the number gets pretty big, and it's significant. We're going to get into 9/11, I promise, some point in the not too distant future. I don't believe that 19 guys pulled that off all by themselves, but I'll get into what we have evidence to support again at some point in the near future. But suffice it to say, just from the soldiers on the ground who did the thing, 19 guys, worst terrorist attack on American soil in history. Now imagine out of officially the DHS wants to say 21 million people illegally crossed the border under Biden. Our friends like J.J. Carroll from CBP, 24-year special agent, says it's more like 50 million. So you could have an infinitesimal little, 0.01% of that many people that are terrorists, and you're talking 50 to 100,000 terrorists at a bare minimum. I mean, and then compare that to the 19 and what happened on 9/11 as far as foot soldiers are concerned. I'm not talking logistics, back end, and all the stuff that goes with that. Anyway, I'm trying to paint the picture for you of just how big the enemy is. It's not 19 guys. It's not lone wolves. It's not a handful of sleeper cells here and there. Here's a number for you that you can confirm. Hezbollah had 300 sleeper cells in America by the end of the 1990s. That was closed source before. It's now open source intel. And that number is exponentially greater now than it was then. So it's not hard to get your head wrapped around the fact that they have the numbers to pull off mass scale attacks across the country simultaneously, multiple days back to back, to completely crush us. And then, of course, what happens after 3 days of that? They're going to start taking down power grids. We know the Chinese have access to our power grids. Heck, it was just revealed 2 days ago that Microsoft has outsourced the management of our DoD computers, some of them, a significant portion of them, to Chinese SEs, systems engineers. How does that make sense? You've got a country that is hell-bent and determined to steal our IP and weaken us as best as they can, and yet you hire them to look after our top secret DoD systems. It could be special kind of stupid to go down that road. Anyway, so tier 2 cities present elevated risks due to limited security infrastructure and slower tactical response windows. Open access trauma centers are viewed as vulnerable due to their operational tempo, lack of perimeter control, and high civilian density. And I'll repeat what I said last night. When I read this report on Thursday night, the first thing that crossed my mind is, what if these guys they steal an ambulance and they drive up to a trauma center, or a bunch of them drive up to a trauma center, and they do a Timothy McVeigh and they blow half the building away. See, the next part to this is by targeting tier 1 trauma centers and then having all of these swarm attacks happening simultaneously. Where do you take the injured to? Where do you take the injured, to get fixed up? I mean, I'm not going to get way off in the weeds here, but I was in a really serious wreck November 2nd, 1996 that cost me the vision in my left eye, and my face was tore up from this wreck. And that wreck happened at 10:30 in the morning, and it was 6 p.m. by the time they finally got me to a hospital. 3 hospitals later, finally got me to a hospital with somebody who had the skill set to debride my face and the ocular injury, which in the end cost me my vision. So again, think of it as the tier 1, trauma centers are down for your city, and you get injured in one of these attacks, or your kids do, the chances of survival are now plummeting because the people who are supposed to be looking after you are no longer there. They've been killed or blown up, whatever the case may be. This has been well thought out by the bad guys. And if nothing else, like Jeff MD has mentioned, these guys are really, really patient to do the attack exactly the way they want to do it to have the biggest impact. All right, so anticipated tactics include body and vehicle-borne IEDs at trauma center drop-off points, coordinated armed assaults, and potential hybrid attacks involving cyber disruption. While the U.S. intelligence community reports no confirmed plots at this time, alert levels remain elevated under DHS guidance. So the SITREP just explains everything else that I've already said, so I'm not going to go through it again. I'll come down to ISKP and Al-Qaeda, though. So Islamic State Khorasan Province, they're an offshoot of ISIS, founded in 2015. And keep in mind, ISIS, all the different ISIS groups are spin-offs of AQ, Al-Qaeda. ISKP is operationally active in Afghanistan and Pakistan and influences global terrorism through digital radicalization, sophisticated planning, and brutal execution. Its ideology seeks to attack Western soft targets, especially healthcare and public safety institutions. So on the topic of radicalization, so the guy who attacked New Orleans on January the 1st this year was reportedly radicalized online. And at that particular point in time, we did a deep dive into that to see what the numbers look like as far as people becoming radicalized online. Here's the scary thing. The FBI, who have all these behavioral models, think of the TV series Mindhunter, for example, where they can predict with relatively good accuracy how somebody goes from stage 1, 2, 3, etc. The average time to radicalize somebody online by a highly organized terrorist group today is approximately 3 weeks. That's the average time to radicalize somebody, to get them to the point where they feel they've lost all hope, and their best case scenario is to be a martyr for their cause and go do the thing so they get their 72 virgins, etc., etc. Anyway, moving on from there. So Afghanistan, Pakistan is where ISKP typically located. Al-Qaeda, which of course was founded by Osama bin Laden in the 1980s, remains focused on high-profile attacks against us and our allies, and continues to pursue long-range symbolic strikes and works tactically with affiliated networks like ISKP. So on that topic, I want to mention we put a situation report out. I think it was Thursday, might have been Wednesday, but I think it was Thursday. And I got up the next day and there's an email at the top of my inbox from Patreon saying that we published illegal content. And I'm like, what on earth is this? So I go and check it out, and their definition of illegal content was, we published a report that has been proven to be accurate, that Osama bin Laden's offspring and their offspring are working out in the open in Afghanistan under the cover of the Taliban, putting together the next series of terrorist attacks on America because their name's bin Laden. They're a big draw for money. People want to put the money into them, but they're so brazen, they're not even attempting to hide it. There's one of the older sons who was presumed dead. It's now been confirmed he's not dead, and he's working actively to attack us. So here's what Patreon said. Patreon said that we were making accusations against the bin Laden family that were unsubstantiated, and that we had essentially defamed them. And somehow they spun that into we were peddling illegal information, and basically told us either you take the article down or we'll take the article down. And if we take the article down, we'll take your whole page down with it. So that's the reason, for those of you who've asked, why we focus on Substack. Substack at this particular point in time has no censorship unless it comes to you're doing something illegal or pornography. We've confirmed that with direct talks with them. We've confirmed it with other creators. And that's why we've had this, kind of soft push going on for a few months now to tell people, hey, you should probably move from Patreon over to Substack, because there's no guarantee we'll wake up tomorrow and our page will be there. And that actually happened to us earlier this week on our YouTube channel. John Wheaton was out of town with his kids. I'm sorry to go down this rabbit hole, but I think it's important for people to know how heavy the hands are behind most levers in big tech. So John Wheaton was out of town, filmed a short video last Sunday to basically describe what he does to protect his family when they're traveling and when they're in public. He picked up his EDC, showed it to the camera, described some of the accessories, set it back down again. I get an email almost immediately from YouTube saying that we broke the gun rules. They've taken the video down and they're shutting our channel down. So I go and I log in and I can see it on the back end, but on the front end, all that it said was, this page no longer exists, blah, 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 blah. I've appealed countless decisions over the years with YouTube, and I can tell you it's the one and only one that we've ever won. I don't know why, but thank God we did. And it was our smaller channel. It was our big channel. I want to say today's like 435,000 subscribers, but our smaller channel was the one that got hit. It's back up and running, but at the end of the day, I can tell you gun tubers like Print, Shoot, Repeat, Kentucky Ballistics, they're all sitting on 2 permanent strikes, not the 2 that, the 90-day strikes that roll off. I'm talking permanent strikes. So you get one more and poof, gone, you're deplatformed. There's no right to free speech on any of these private platforms. That's their business, I guess. I suppose they can do it. But at the end of the day, I don't believe in censoring people's words or anything like that, even stuff you don't want to hear. Anyway, getting back on topic here. So courses of action. This is one of the things I actually like about AX, that they lay out what things look like if they go down maybe some different paths here. Okay. So the most likely course of action, MLCOA, ISKP and Al-Qaeda continue propaganda and planning without immediate execution. U.S. Homeland Security posture remains elevated. Increased surveillance, threat monitoring, and localized threat interdiction preempt larger attacks. The most dangerous course of action, MDCOA. Simultaneous attacks occur on trauma centers, transportation hubs, and houses of worship across several Tier 2 cities. These coordinated strikes cripple emergency response systems, cause mass casualties, and strain federal response capacity. And then we have the least likely course of action, LLCOA. Successful international interdictions disrupt operational command nodes, neutralizing plot leaders, and reducing capability. Threats diminish, allowing resumption of routine security postures across domestic infrastructure. CONUS impact, so that would be the continental U.S. Simultaneous or near simultaneous attacks on trauma centers, airports, religious institutions would produce 1. Mass casualties and cascading failures in local emergency medical response. 2. Public panic, economic paralysis, and localized lockdown. 3. Immediate pressure on federal agencies to expand support to under-resourced city governments. 4. Nationwide strain on trauma systems due to patient overflow and system confusion. 5. Political fallout and potential shifts in immigration security policy and domestic surveillance. So the conclusion on this is that U.S. trauma centers, especially those in Tier 2 cities, face increasing threat levels from ISKP and Al-Qaeda as part of a broader targeting strategy that includes transportation hubs and religious sites. Though no specific plots are confirmed, indicators reflect coordinated planning, growing operational confidence, and strategic intent to disrupt the healthcare and civil life. Continued monitoring, threat modeling, and proactive security enhancements are essential to prevent mass casualty events and preserve confidence in emergency systems. So you can see at the bottom here in the attributions, Sarah Adams is copied amongst some other people. I want to quickly address one of the comments. Somebody made a snide comment, I don't know if it was yesterday or before, that we were regurgitating Sarah Adams. Go back in time, go back 2 years on this very podcast, Survival Dispatch News, and you will hear us as one of the very first organizations that were out there talking about swarm attacks and the proliferation of swarm attacks, and especially the open source intel showing that schools were targeted for simultaneous attacks in smaller counties. I'm not trying to take anything away from Sarah or anybody else, but it's funny how people immediately pull out the daggers without even stopping to consider, well, wait a minute. Survival Dispatch News has assembled a pretty amazing team of experts. And if you're not familiar with my company and this particular podcast and channel, I have guys like Mike Glover. I've got CIA operatives and agents, Green Berets, EOD specialists, comms specialists, S2 specialists, which are intel, and the list goes on and on and on. It's not me. I'm the guy who assembled the team, but the team that we've put together is pretty spectacular and have some pretty awesome credentials. Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers would be another one that just came to mind. Anyway, moving on from there, I want to get into some additional news. We didn't get to cover everything last night that we wanted to because of the discussion, and I didn't want to have my guys working late on a Friday night. It's not fair to them. So here's another one. U.S. declares Lashkar Proxy, TRF, a terror group after Thalgam attack. So the U.S. has designated the Resistance Front, a proxy of Pakistan-based terrorist group Lashkar-e-Taiba, which had initially claimed responsibility for the Thalgam terrorist attack, a foreign terrorist organization, FTO, and specifically designated global terrorist, SDGT, a decision hailed by External Affairs Minister S. Jakinshar, meaning in the Pakistan government, and a strong affirmation, Indian government, of counterterrorism cooperation between us and them. One of the things that was on the list last night that I didn't get into, again because of time constraints, was unconfirmed reports inside the DHS, FBI, etc., that there's a whole lot of people in those organizations who feel like the security threat to us from Islamic terrorists is not being taken serious enough. And part of that is because Obama and Biden started this false narrative that white supremacists and middle-aged white guys were the number one domestic threat to America. And I took ChatGPT to task over that earlier this week, and you may have seen it. And it made this false claim, and I said, back that up. And it came back, it went all the way back to Timothy McVeigh to today, and it brought up 5 examples. And I said, is that it? And it said, yep, that's it. I said, okay, well, come on over here and have a look at the religionofpeace.com and tell me how many Islamic attacks have happened since 9/11. And immediately it backed up and said, whoa, obviously 48,700 attacks by Islamic people against non-believers and Christians since 9/11. Clearly middle-aged white guys aren't the primary threat, but that was the politicization and weaponization of, call it, lawfare against us by Obama and Biden and all the other clowns. And it's great news, by the way, that DNI Tulsi Gabbard yesterday released all of the information unredacted, clearly showing that Barack Obama directed his lieutenants, every last one of them, from John Brennan to Comey to Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, the list goes on and on and on, to fabricate the 2016 Russia baloney and undermine Donald Trump. Bunch of liars and thieves, and I hope that they all get charged and get long sentences, but I'm not going to hold my breath because we all know the likelihood of that happening is probably not great. All right, next piece of information. Again, so these terror attacks that I'm listing are things that have happened in the past 48 hours. Sniper unit fired upon convoy, 27 Pakistani troops killed in separate attacks by Baylock fighters. IEDs also used. So Baylock insurgent groups have claimed responsibility for multiple deadly attacks on Pakistani military forces in Balochistan over the past 2 days. The Balochistan Liberation Army, BLA, stated its Fatah squad targeted a military transport bus in Kalat, killing 27 troops. The Pakistan Liberation Front, BLF, also announced separate operations, including IED blast ambushes, resulting in further casualties. So I'm going to give some of you the backstory who aren't used to watching our podcast or might be new to our podcast. about 6 weeks ago, I did a deep dive into the 530 some odd episodes of Survival Dispatch News that we've done. And over 40% of them touched on terrorism in one way or another. And, simple business stuff, right? Do more of what you're good at. So we now provide a daily situation report on global and domestic terrorism. And then we cover an additional topic if time allows, or if there's something really, really important happening. And even myself, I've been following the Religion of Peace, for years, religionofpeace.com. And when I share those numbers with people, their jaw typically hits the floor. Let's check it out as of this morning. So I'm going to refresh it right now. All right. So according to the religionofpeace.com, and this guy documents everything, 47,849 Islamic terrorist attacks since 9/11. And if you look here in the past 6 days, the jihad report, 36 attacks, 144 killed, 68 injured, 1 suicide blast, 10 different countries. And here's the Religion of Peace right here, the atrocity of the week. And we've covered this twice this week now. Islamists hack 66 African villagers to death and cut them up with machetes, killed them with machetes. They weren't dead when they cut them up. They died as a result of being cut up. The numbers are, like I say, absolutely staggering. So I brought this piece of news up, by the way. This just hit my radar. It happened earlier in the week. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, almost all the time, all of these global terrorist attacks by Islamists are really downplayed. They're not reported on by legacy media. You don't see anything about them on TV. You don't see anything in the newspapers. They do that because they want you to believe that the Religion of Peace is really peaceful, when indeed it's not. And sometimes when we get this information, because it's from smaller groups like these guys here, look at this little name up here. I don't even know what the heck the name of this newspaper is in Afghanistan. I certainly can't read that or pronounce it, but this is an Afghani newspaper. And here's a former soldier killed in gunman attack in Coast, and it's got sources that go with it, blah, 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 blah. And the reason I put this in here is because I had a friend who was a sniper in Afghanistan, and he did 3 deployments to Afghanistan, and he came home unannounced. We didn't realize he was home, and he showed up. We had a big party going on and a cookout, and he showed up and he had this duffel bag with him. And he said, well, boys, he says, if you want to know what I've been doing, he throws this duffel bag down on the picnic table. He says, 48 hours ago, I took that away from some very wealthy Taliban. So he opens it up, and it was full of Afghanistan $100 bills, which were worth 23 cents of our money at the time. And he said he was pissed off because when he got home, he saw headlines on all the supposedly atrocious things that our troops were doing, which were fabricated lies. And he says, this is what we're doing over there. The ANA, so the Afghan National Army, or the ANP, Afghan National Police, on average at that time were paying somebody like this guy $1.50 a day to put their lives on the line. The Taliban, on the other hand, were paying the equivalent of $20 US per day. So an order of magnitude difference. You can essentially feed a family over there, they say, for about $50 US per month. But at the end of the day, this friend of mine who was a sniper, his job was to track these guys for weeks on end and take them down, take the money, and destabilize their ability to recruit people. Because again, it was easy for them to recruit if they had the money. If they didn't have the money, then people like this would fight on behalf of their country. So all these years later, again, Jeff MD spoke about it last night. These guys have long memories. They're super patient. And these poor guys who put their lives on the line for their countries back then, now they've all got hits on them. And eventually the bad guys, AQ, catches up with them, or IS. And there you go. So that's the reason I put this one in for today. So next up, and this has been posted before, June 22nd, 2025, so a month ago or so, for this National Terrorism Advisory Bulletin. And there's all kinds of subsections to it and all kinds of links to extra information and blah, 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 blah. And I want to read it to you and bore you with it. So I submitted it to Chat GPT. I use Grok, Chat GPT, Claude.ai, Claud, Venice, FlexClip, Enoch, I'm forgetting somebody else there. FlexClip has their own built-in AI. I think I've got 7 subscriptions now because some of them are better than others in certain aspects. Plus, I like to run them against each other to see who gives the best answer. So I had it summarize that report, and here's what ChatGPT spit back out again. The bulletin warns of a heightened threat environment across the U.S. driven by ongoing Israel-Iran conflict, low-level cyber attacks from pro-Iranian hacktivists, and possibly Iranian-linked cyber groups targeting U.S. networks, potential targeting of U.S. government officials tied to past actions against Iran, increased risk of violence if Iran's leadership issues any religious ruling calling for retaliation on American soil, which of course did happen after they released this. And there's a fatwa on Donald Trump again. And I saw they have something like a give, send, go type of deal for, terrorists, and they'd raise something like 22 million for whoever kills Donald Trump. Increased risk of violence, we'll recover that. Calls to violence from foreign terrorist organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis urging action against U.S. assets. A surge in domestic extremist violence tied to anti-Semitic or anti-Israel motivations. Okay, I'll buy that, but almost all these reports, even though Trump's been in office for 6 months, still want to tell you the American citizen that middle-aged white guys are the biggest threat. And my response, that's always the same. If we were the biggest threat, you would know it. I saw a black comedian put a video out about a year ago, and he said, "Are you all crazy? You want to go, head to head with these white guys who started the biggest wars in history, ended the biggest wars in history, built the nuclear bomb? Y'all are crazy. Leave them alone. Let them do their thing." It was a funny, stand-up comedy routine at the time. Anyway, so the duration for this warning, heightened elevation, red level critical, for DHS is effective June 22nd through September 22nd. Recommendations include strengthening cybersecurity and adopting CISA best practices, reporting suspicious activity. If you see something, say something, and to local and FBI channels. Bottom line, with no specific plot identified, the risk of cyber and ideological violence is elevated due to geopolitical tensions, requiring increased vigilance in both authorities and citizens. So there's a black hat group of hackers out there called Typhoon, and it's a cooperative effort between 3 countries. So China, North Korea, and Iran. And they work hand in hand on finding holes in our networks, exploiting those holes, and gaining control of critical infrastructure, especially our power grid. So definitely not our friends. Here's another piece of news that I didn't have a chance to share yesterday. So this happened on July 15th, so 4 days ago. So DRC unrest provides opportunities for Islamic State. With more than 100 armed groups operating in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, the region is one of the world's worst conflict zones. The M23 rebel offensive launched in late January further ratcheted up the violence and chaos. As M23 rapidly expanded its territory to the north and south of the regional capital, Goma, it drew more attention from the Congolese military and allied militias, which may have given the region's Islamic State affiliate more space to launch attacks. Even by conservative fatality estimates, the first quarter of this year was the most fatal since 2002, when the country was embroiled in the Second Congo War. Analyst Ladens wrote in June 18th report for the Armed Conflict and Location Event Data Project. While both the M23 and allied democratic forces have long been active in North Kivu province, the violence by each group was previously concentrated in geographically distinct areas, Surratt wrote. When these areas converge, what follows is illustrative of the risk of escalating insecurity through overlapping violence. Initially formed as a Ugandan rebel group in 1994, the Allied Democratic Forces is led by Musa Balaka, who moved to group toward more extremist views. In 2019, Balaku pledged allegiance to the Islamic State group and renamed his group the Islamic State Central African Province. In a report released in January, United Nations groups of experts said there were persistent rumors throughout 2024 and contacts present between M23 and ISCAP, the Islamic province, which intensified when M23 advanced into ISCAP's area of operations in Lubero, February 2025. Multiple sources confirmed that M23 saw a non-aggression pact with the Allied Democratic Forces requesting safe passage. including for recruits transiting from Ituri to M23 territory, and urging the Allied Democratic Forces to limit attacks to FARDC soldiers, the report stated. At the end of the day, it's very rare that you will find any news on any of this stuff where you would expect to find it. You're not going to find it on CNN. Heck, there was a CNN crew that was attacked by some ISIS affiliated people last week, and they reported it, meaning the people who were attacked, but CNN themselves never reported it. You had to go to third party, smaller groups like this particular ADF magazine to get the news. So even CNN wasn't going to tell people that, oh, those ISIS terrorists, attacked some of our camera crews. So crazy stuff. Next one up, this is from July 13th. So again, this week, Anatomy of Terrorist Threats and Vulnerabilities in Central Africa. This is a longer paper. I'm just going to read the abstract. What emerged as terrorism in Central Africa region is the logical consequence of resistance to entrenched political dynasties ruling countries in the region, as well as the interplay of cross-regional security dynamics in an era of global terrorism orchestrated by radicalized extremists within and across international boundaries. The existence of fragile states with compromised institutions of law and order provides enabling environment for terrorism to thrive in the region. These vulnerabilities are deepened by the existence of often neglected, very porous, under-patrolled borders and under-governed spaces that provide sanctuaries for armed groups engaged in acts of terrorism against the states. It notes that terrorism in the Central African region could be curtailed through deliberate national policies of enlightened political inclusion, effective governance, and counterterrorism cooperation at bilateral, multilateral platforms within and beyond the region. On a methodological note, this chapter relied significantly on tertiary sources as well as some of my previous works published elsewhere. And again, vulnerabilities, terrorist threats and vulnerabilities, Central Africa. So at this particular point in time, Africa by far is the leading area for Islamic terrorism and terrorism in general. Middle East would be second. Europe would be third, and we're still a ways behind that, although we're dealing with some of this, right? January 1st, that was an online radicalization who decided to drive his truck through a bunch of people. Plus, there were IEDs that didn't go off, thankfully, but we're not immune to it. But I think our security mechanisms are doing much better than the poor countries, that's for sure. Another one here, and this is Ethiopia. Ethiopia arrests dozens of suspected Islamic State militants, and this was on July 16th. So 3 days ago. Did anybody read this in the mainstream media, the legacy media? I didn't see it. I've got a couple TVs over here always running mainstream media so I can hear what's going on in their world so that I can investigate what they're telling the truth on, what they're not. Usually it's not. And did not hear a single word about this one. So we'll give you the Cliff Notes version of this. Ethiopia has arrested dozens of suspected Islamic State militants who it claimed had been trained and deployed to carry out operations across the country. The state-affiliated Phantom broadcaster reported the 82 suspects were part of Islamic State Somalia affiliate, which operates in the semi-autonomous Puntland region, according to a statement by the National Intelligence Security Services, which was shared with FANA. The Islamic State faction in Somalia has become an increasingly important part of its parent organization's worldwide network in recent years. So at one point in time, somebody wanted to say, well, ISIS is defeated, we've knocked them out. And if memory serves me right, it might have actually been Barry Sortero who said that. Either way, these guys don't go away. And they will continue fighting until every last one of them, leaves this earth. You can't count on any of these terrorist groups being broken up and never to come back again. It may seem like they're down for the count, but eventually they come back, and they've been resurging, especially in Africa and to a lesser extent, Middle East in recent years. Next one up, Palestinians' latest scam. Hamas can become a political party from 2 days ago, July 17th. Abbas cannot have forgotten the atrocities Hamas committed against his men during the 2007 coup. Some of his loyalists were dragged through the streets and lynched, while others were thrown from the high floors of tall buildings. In addition to the 2007 coup, Hamas, a few years later, was caught planning a second coup to try and take over the West Bank as well as the Gaza Strip. The calls for Hamas to join political action actually aim to legitimize the terror group and present its leaders as a bunch of politicians seeking seats in parliament and jobs in government, when the reality is anything but that. The international community, including the Trump administration, must not fall for the scam. Hamas was not established to serve as a political party. Rather, the terror group was established with the main objective of murdering Jews through jihad, holy war, and replacing Israel with an Islamic state, terror state. Instead of inviting Hamas to engage in political action, Abbas and other Palestinian leaders should have outlawed Hamas a long time ago. That would send a message to all Palestinians that there's no room for genocidal jihadist groups in Palestinian society. Apparently, Abbas and Rajub's desire to destroy Israel is even stronger than their decades-long hatred of Hamas. Destroying Hamas military capabilities is not enough. The group must also cease to exist as a political entity. The only politics Hamas is interested in is jihad, destruction, and death. Paints a beautiful picture, doesn't it? Moving on to the next one. And again, these are all stories that we had queued up for last night's panel, but we ran long, which is okay. That happens. And that's why I'm doing this special Saturday broadcast to play catch up a little bit. It takes a lot of time and effort for all of us to gather up this information, put it in a presentable format, put it into our briefs, sit reps. I said to my wife this morning, I said, well, we missed half of the content last night that myself and the others spent many hours, bringing all of that information together. And I don't want to just walk away from that investment in time. It's important information. So I'm going to do a special Saturday kind of like catch up broadcast. And I don't always have time to do this on Saturdays, but that's why I'm doing this, in case you're wondering. So migration madness. France opens its doors to Gaza refugees. Wow, this one is pretty brutal. This is the ongoing self-inflicted genocide that's happening in Western Europe. France has just paved the way for any and all Gazans to be welcomed as refugees on its soil. This is a major decision that could lead to a massive influx of refugees from the Gaza Strip, including Hamas supporters. Voices on the right are speaking out against what they call an irresponsible decision. The decision follows a ruling concerning a Palestinian mother and her son who fled the Gaza Strip shortly after the attacks of October 7th and were taken in by the OFPRA, Office François pour la Protection des Refugees, something, or French Office for the Protection of Refugees and Stateless Persons. Initially, the OFPRA had refused to grant protection to the woman and her son. However, the CDNA, Cour de National de Droit d'Asile, or National Court of Asylum, judges ruled that the conditions had changed and that persecution by the Israeli army was now systemic and widespread. Based on their case, the CNDA ruled on Friday, July 11th, that any Palestinian asylum seekers could benefit from the same protection on the grounds that they were persecuted because of their nationality. The mere fact of having Palestinian nationality is now grounds for eligibility for asylum in France. Even though Palestinians do not form a recognized state, is their membership of a particular community that places them at risk of persecution by Israel, the judges ruled. Instead of reading the rest of this, here's a rhetorical question for you. So the Palestinians are Muslim. They are strong supporters of Islamic terrorism, Hamas, Hezbollah, etc., etc. Why is there a ginormous wall between Egypt and Gaza, preventing them from coming into Egypt, another Muslim country? And why do none of the surrounding Muslim countries in the Middle East and Africa want to allow Palestinians to come into their country? Just chew on that and try to get your head wrapped around why that's the case. There's a lot to be revealed there. All right, moving on. So the Europeans just released their 2025 terrorism situation and trend report. And if you look over here on the left, you'll see that this is a pretty extensive document. Let me get down to the bottom. It's just 75 pages long. And I'm not going to read it to you. I'm not even going to read it to myself, but I threw it at Chat GPT and I asked it to give us a summary of it. So the bottom line up front: terrorism in the EU remains a complex and evolving threat, increasingly driven by geopolitical instability, online radicalization, especially among youth, and the use of emerging technologies. Jihadist terrorism remains the most lethal, while right-wing and left-wing and unclassified threats are rising and overlapping ideologically. So just forewarning, so the Europeans are on board with the Barry Obama crap that the white guys, we are the terrorist threat. Don't quote me on these numbers, but last year Poland had something like 200, 300, 400 rapes, and Great Britain had something like 40,000 rapes. I wonder what caused that. How come there's so much more in Great Britain, Sweden, France? Oh, because they've allowed their countries to be flooded with people from third world countries who are Muslims, who hate them and have no respect for Western law, and think that it's their right to rape women and young children, including young boys. It's incompatible. At the end of the day, whether you think that, Islam is good or bad, it's not compatible with Western values, period, full stop. And if you put it in the same, geography as other cultures like ours, it's going to result in problems and friction, like having 40,000 rapes a year. Probably not a good thing, right? All right, key statistics 2024, 58 terrorist attacks reported by 14 EU member states, 34 completed, 5 failed, 19 foiled, 24 attributed to jihadists, 21 to left-wing anarchists, 8 to unclassified, 4 to separatists, 1 to right-wing. 1 to right-wing. And I would even question that. 449 arrests for terrorism-related offenses in 20 member states. Again, this is Europe. 289 jihadist-related, most in Spain and France. Color me shocked. 47 right-wing and 28 left-wing anarchists, 27 separatists, and 58 unclassified. Yeah, 47 right-wing. You know who they're counting as the right-wing? Guys like Tommy Robinson, who are trying to save their country from Pakistani Muslim rape gangs that have raped in the order of 250,000 young girls in Great Britain in the past 20 years. Some estimates peg it at twice that. And then 427 convictions, 59 acquittals across 16 member states. So the main trends: number 1, jihadist terrorism, most lethal form, 5 killed, 18 injured, rise in youth involvement, online self-radicalization, Gaza conflict, and ISAQ propaganda used to incite attacks. 18 foiled attacks targeted major events like the Olympics, Euro 2024, and Jewish institutions. Increasing use of encrypted platforms, AI-generated propaganda, and digital hawala systems for funding. Number 2, right-wing extremism. Okay, 1 attack, 47 arrests, probably BS. Notable radicalization of minors via 764 and COM digital cults. Okay. Merging with occult, Satanist ideologies and use of generative AI for propaganda. Even though they already said that there were way more attacks from left-wing, which is Antifa, they had to put the one right-wing guy at the top so that they could move left-wing down 1 to 3. Okay. Left-wing anarchist terrorism, 21 attacks, but they're number 3. And we're number 2. Okay, that makes sense. Somebody's having trouble with math. Mostly arsons in Italy and Greece. Some actors financially motivated rather than ideologically driven. Propaganda driven by anti-military and anti-capitalist narratives. Number 4, separatist terrorism. 4 completed attacks. France and Italy. Decreased activity compared to 2023. Number 5, unclassified hybrid extremism. Sharp rise in arrests. Includes anti-government, anti-system groups, and those linked to foreign intelligence services. Hybrid ideologies increasingly common, blending jihadist, accelerationist, and apocalyptic themes. Emerging threats, minors and radicalization. 133 arrestees aged 12 to 20, including some as young as 12. Youth recruited via gaming platforms, social media, and encrypted apps. Cult networks coercing youth into violence and self-harm. And the next one, use of technology, AI tools used for creating propaganda, evading moderation, VR and AR, augmented reality for simulation training, 3D printed firearms, and crypto-based funding methods growing. Geopolitical context. Gaza conflict and Russia's invasion of Ukraine fuel radicalization. Collapse of Assad's regime in Syria and the rise of HTS raises security concerns. IS resurgence in Syria and recruitment of foreign fighters in Africa and Afghanistan. Massive arms flow and instability from war zones risks European security long-term. Europol response, which is European police. Major operations disrupted IS propaganda networks. i.e. Elam Foundation takedown, largest coordinated referral action against online hate speech, increased cooperation with Eurojust and EU member states. And then it made this nice infographic for us here. And this is how they've summarized up the 75-page report from the Terrorism Council, whatever they're referred to in Europe. And look at right here, main trends, right-wing extremism. But they only have one instance. It's the exact same WEF globalist lies trying to vilify white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And then, as I showed, I think it was last night, might have been the night before, that the Somali guy who's running for Omar Fatah or something like that's running for mayor of Minneapolis, basically throwing insults out at the legislature of Minneapolis or Minnesota, saying that all you white people, you're the terrorist threat, not my people from Somalia. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. If you believe that, I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona that you might be interested in buying from me. So anyway, that's all the stuff that we missed last night. Didn't have time to get to. Actually, we do have. I want to give Astromom 1204 credit here for this. Let me get this pulled up. So this is the reader submitted story of the day. So Astromom's very active in our Signal chat. If you go to survivaldispatchnews.com, sign up for free, you'll get a Saturday watch guide. It hasn't gone out yet today. It'll go out shortly. And that's links to everything that we've done for the week. You get daily situation reports. The only thing you don't get in the sit reps is all of the supporting links that go below my signature. Paying members get all of that sort of stuff. But paying members also get an invite to our super busy Signal chat. On a busy day, there's 3,000 messages go through there, all kinds of information sharing, especially as it relates to, the topics that we cover on a day in, day out basis at SDN. You get notified in the SDN Survival Dispatch News Emergency Notification System. You get $370 worth of Survival Dispatch Insider e-magazines. They sell for $10 a piece. You get 37 of them, all included for $7.99 a month or $75 a year. You get 2.5 months free when you sign up for the year. You get our Sunday Threat Matrix newsletter, which is the high-level overview of everything that's going on. And geez, I think that's probably it. That's all the high points, at least. So this one here came in again from Astromon 1204. America First Legal uncovers documents conclusively proving the infamous Garland memo was politically orchestrated and coordinated with the Biden White House. From the no shit Batman department, right? July 18th. So this was yesterday. America First Legal released explosive new documents exclusively proving what AFL has known since day one, the infamous October 4th memo from Attorney General Garland labeling concerned parents as domestic terrorists was a political operation of weaponized government, not the normal lawful execution of federal laws by the Department of Justice. These never-before-seen documents, uncovered only because of AFL's relentless efforts over the past 3.5 years, exposed not only the Biden White House's involvement in pushing a weaponized DOJ, but also strong dissent from careers within the department's Civil Rights Division, who warned that there was no federal authority or legal basis to target these parents in the first place because their speech is protected by the First Amendment. Now, for the first time since the memo was made public, AFL can complete the timeline of events that occurred between the National School Board Association's memo to DOJ and the October 4th memo being published. As AFL predicted on October 7th, 2021, the normal process was not followed, with political leadership circumventing and disregarding the advice of DOJ lawyers. Friday, October 1st, White House already pressuring DOJ for action. Tamara Matthews Johnson, a counsel in the Office of the Attorney General, working directly for Attorney General Garland, forwarded the press clips of the day to Kevin Chambers of the Deputy Attorney General's office, saying, "Just checking that you are aware," referencing the NSBA letter. Just over a half hour later, Chambers replied, "We're aware. The challenge here is finding a federal hook, but White House has been in touch about whether we can assist in some form or fashion." So here are the emails that back up everything that I just shared. Saturday, October 2nd, White House says jump, and DOJ replies, "How high?" Saturday morning, 8:17 a.m., Sparkle Sukuman, then of the Associate General's office and now a federal district court judge, emailed a group of attorneys from the department's Civil Rights Division requesting and over the weekend turnaround to identify any authorities the Civil Rights Division enforces that could help address the issue. Later that afternoon, a Civil Rights Division attorney was specifically asked if there was anything more she wanted to share with leadership on this issue, and she replied, "No, there is nothing specific or public I can share." It was then relayed back to Sukunan that, "I think this is the end of the line," to which he responded, "Thanks very much, Pam. I'll pass it on." Sunday, October 3rd, additional DOJ career attorneys raised concern. On Sunday, one day before AG Garland's memo was issued, yet another Civil Rights Division attorney expressed serious concerns with DOJ taking any actions based on the NSBA memo. In an email, the attorney warned that no federal authority existed that supported targeting parents exercising their First Amendment rights, saying it seems that we are ramping up an awful lot of federal manpower for what is currently a non-federal conduct. These concerns were exposed directly to Robert Moosey, the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, who had been specifically looped in by Sparkle Sukunan the previous day, Monday, October 4th. DOJ political leadership plows ahead. By the morning of October 4th, a draft memo had already been completed. At 9:12 a.m., Maisha Braden from the Office of the Deputy Attorney General emailed an amended draft, which apparently removed language pertaining to election integrity following concerns raised by the criminal division that election language would be seen as partisan. 4 minutes later, Shaylin Cochran from the Civil Rights Division sent the draft memo to others, including Moosey with the Civil Rights Division, asking if any concerns should be raised. Later that day, DOJ published the memo to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, U.S. attorneys, and law enforcement agencies across the country. Despite numerous DOJ career attorneys independently raising serious concerns related to targeting parents and issuing a memo ranging from a lack of statutory authority to constitutionally protected speech and a distortion by the NSBA of the facts on the ground, political leadership at DOJ, including now Judge Sparkle Sukunan, pushed forward and published the now infamous Garland memo. As AFL has previously shown, this memo blindsided several of the components charged with implementing it, thus fulfilling AFL's prediction that the normal clearance process was bypassed or corrupted. AG Garland's memo mobilized the full force of the federal government's firepower against concerned parents, not to protect schools, but to silence dissent. Statement from Gene Hamilton, American First Legal President. The Biden administration appears to have engaged in a conspiracy that was ultimately aimed at depriving parents of two fundamental rights, the right to speak and the right to direct the upbringing of their children. They did so with political intentions, most immediately by attempting to influence the Virginia gubernatorial election and to more broadly chill dissent across the United States. America First Legal has been the tip of the spear exposing this wrongdoing for nearly 4 years, and we will not cease seeking to expose and hold accountable those involved. Statement from Dan Epstein, America First Legal Vice President. What these documents show almost 4 years after America First Legal requested them is a clear connection between the Biden White House and the Garland Justice Department to prosecute parents concerned about their children's education. Statement from Ian Pryor, America First Legal Senior Advisor. This is the last one. There's more of this last one I'll read. The Garland memo is one of the most scandalous attempts to deprive Americans of their rights in the history of our republic. When the Great Awakening of Parents occurred in 2021, the Biden administration was desperate to put a stop to it before it could impact the Virginia gubernatorial election. Instead, anyone with half a brain could see the unfathomable scandal unfolding. The course of history in Virginia was altered, and parents refused to surrender their rights which are now being so forcefully defended and jealously guarded by the Trump administration and vindicated by the United States Supreme Court. Whew, that's a mouthful. All right, so that is it for today's sit rep. The only thing that we have left to cover is, let me get our, let me find the conflicted question. I had it handy, I lost it. All right, conflicted question. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I've got about 50 tabs open in this web browser. All right, so post-apocalyptic scenario, conflictedthegame.com. You were forced out of your survival retreat by an incoming hostile army. Now on the run, food and water are low. You and your survivalist friends can barely stave off hunger by foraging. One of your friends comes to you in need of advice. His spouse decided she'll sell her body for supplies at the trade post in order to feed the children. Your friend is between a rock and a hard place and needs your input. What would your advice be? Well, first and foremost, I'd like to see some answers in the live chats and the comment sections. I'm really curious what other people think of this, but here's the first thing that pops into my mind. You can't fight if you're hungry. You can't fight back against people if you're starving and hungry. You just will not have the ability to do so. So I think what I would do is I would say, do not let your wife sell her body to the bad guys here. We're going to go on a recce, so reconnaissance, and we're going to find at least enough food that we can elevate our energy levels a little bit. And while we're doing that recce, we're going to plan the next recce, and we're going to find something vulnerable in one of these bad guys who took our stuff, and we're going to take it back, full stop. And at the end of the day, my opinion is, if this guy's wife, my friend's wife, sells her body to the bad guys, there's no guarantees we're ever going to get her back. There's no guarantees that she's ever going to get paid. There's no guarantees that we'll ever get food out of that. So now my best friend and his kids, not only are they hungry, they've lost their mother. So at some point in time, like if somebody spits in your face or kicks sand in your face, I'm thinking of the old bubblegum cartoons back in the day, you have to stand up for yourself. So again, I would find a way to feed my men so that we could get our energy levels up. We would do some recon. We would find some immediate food just to kind of stave off the worst of the hunger. Then we would go and we would take what was rightfully ours one way or another. We would find a way to get it done. But I would die before I'd let my wife being sold into something like this. And there's no way that I would let my best friend, or any friend for that matter, sell their wife to do this. I'd rather die fighting than, begging in that particular type of scenario. So that's Chris Evans' answer. I'd love to hear what y'all's answers are. If you're in our Signal chat, go on over there and tell me what y'all think there. Put it down in the chats. I'm noticing that actually in the comments down below, I'm noticing there's quite a few more answers. Last night, I saw quite a few of them, maybe 10 or 12 across all the different platforms. So appreciate the engagement, appreciate people sharing. There was one, and I can't remember what it was now, but somebody said something last night. Actually, two people did, that I caught this morning based on yesterday's question, and they were exceptionally good answers, like really, really good answers. So definitely interested to hear what y'all have to say. John is going to be back tomorrow night, and I think he's getting ready to start a series, surprise, surprise, on Islam, just like the series that he did on communism, which was extremely eye-opening. So look for that. Again, if he doesn't start on it tomorrow night, he'll probably start on Tuesday. I don't want to speak for him, but I know that it's high on his list of priorities. And then I'll be back on Monday. I've got Ted Yoho joining us on Monday. So 20-year congressional rep from Alachua County, other side of Florida here, and Randy and Jeff, of course, as per usual. We've got some other big names that are in the pipeline that I'll share with you as time goes on. You'll probably see Mike Glover more frequently. Mike and I are friends. We work together on a number of things, and it's really good to see him back in the podcast space. Love having him on with us on Survival Dispatch News. He's like a walking encyclopedia. Just a quick reminder that the way that we can work, especially myself, but the way my team can work crazy, crazy long hours bringing you guys the truth, is people who pay $7.99 a month for our Guardian, and our partners like Carnival, CCW Safe, Compliant Technologies, etc., that help us defer expenses. And I mentioned it recently. We spend $3,000 a month on software subscriptions. There's another piece of software, well, not software, but service that I'd like to get from Track TRC. It's $2,100, but the intel that comes out of this group is phenomenal. But we've got bills to pay, and we've got to put food on the table. And the way that happens is when you patronize our sponsors like Carnival, and they can continue to pay us a monthly stipend to help us defer some expenses, then we all get the benefits of that. I get to put food on the table for my family. You get the truth, and our partners, they end up, their business succeeds. And if you can't afford to pay us a monthly fee, that's okay. You're still going to get a ton of information at no charge. That's our mission. Our mission is to dispatch information so our fellow Americans and friends of America can be empowered as fellow guardians to help save our republic and save our American Christian culture. That's it. I will see you again Monday night. Between now and then, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America, and enjoy the closing video.
And they have unsuccessfully tried to take down the wrong person.
He's absolutely going to come back with full vengeance the next time around.
Now think about what 4 years of a retribution presidency might look like. Our Constitution really does give the president tremendous power to destroy. This will be something we could never have imagined.
Now the gloves are off.
Some of Trump's close political allies told him they are working on figuring out the identities of the FBI and DOJ staff and forming lists.
I will direct a completely overhauled DOJ to investigate every radical DA and AG in America for their illegal, racist enforcement of the law. The deep state is destroying our nation, but the tables must turn, and we will quickly destroy the deep state. We know where the bodies are buried. There are a lot of people out there that have done some very, very evil things, very bad things, I would say treasonous things against our country. People that have done such harm to our country. I've been looking at them for a long time.
He could order the investigation and prosecution of individuals who he sees as enemies.
Put them all in jail where they belong. You gotta get